Hello, my name is Mary Beth Canning, and I will be your professor for managing the annual fund. Thanks so much for joining me. I thought I would start with a little bit about me. I have been in the nonprofit sector for over 25 years and has served as a chief development officer at three different institutions, namely Maine General Health, um, Winchester Hospital, which became Leahy Health, as well as the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. I am currently a consultant. The name of my firm is Mary Beth Canning Consulting, and I'm very excited to run through this course with you. You can see my family members here. My husband is over to the right, and my son, John Garrett. John is over to the left. Garrett is in the bottom with the ocean behind him. And these are our family of dogs. And we had a recent wedding. John married Molly, and Garrett is getting ready to marry Jen. And in the upper top corner are my two nieces. We were out in Boston one day. So that tells you a little bit about me. These are my, where I have worked: Dana-Farber, Leahy Health, Maine General Health, and some of the clients that I have worked with: Boys and Girls Club, League of Women Voters, and the Greater Boston Food Bank. I've also had the pleasure of working with the Cummings Foundation and am on the board of the Association of Fundraising Professionals, as well as the Association for Healthcare Philanthropy. So this course builds on the fundamentals of fundraising, of the fundraising course that you should have taken before this course. As you know, the annual fund is one of the disciplines within fundraising, and we are going to be kind of covering the entire gamut of the annual fund. In this first lecture, I'm going to be talking with you about all of the different types of methods that are applied to the annual funds. And so this will be a very good base for you that hopefully you can use for years to come. You can all read the course Learning Outcomes. And this is the class modules. So on April 8th, that will be our first class. We'll be looking at the introduction to the annual campaign. April 15th, we'll be talking about planning and assessment of the annual campaign. The 22nd of April will be the third session. That's called Building the Team, and we'll be talking about the culture of philanthropy. April 29th, we're going to be looking at different types of mechanisms that are used in annual fund. May 6th, we're going to talk about measurement and evaluation and the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion in our work. And then on the 6th, we're going to bring it all together by talking about marketing and communications, very important components of anyone's annual campaign. This is our weekly structure. Mondays, you'll have your reading assignment. You'll be responsible to read the material that is also in our book, the annual campaign. The book is dated, but I still think that it's a very good, kind of logically laid out book for you to rely upon. I've supplemented it with lots of different additional readings. More updated information is included in the PowerPoints that I'll provide to you. My office hours are Tuesdays, 3 o'clock. I'm available on Zoom, and it would be really great if you could let me know if you are attending. I would really appreciate that. I would like to meet each of you. So if you could be sure to do that within the the 6-week period, that would be wonderful. On Wednesdays, your initial response to the discussion post is necessary. You're also going to, by the Wednesday, you should have completed all of the reading assignments that I have given you. And by Sunday, I expect you to be replying to 2 of your peers. It is not enough to just say, great comment or compliment one of your colleagues. That's completely fine. But I also want to hear what your position is. And I want you to back that up, citing information from the readings that you have had or my lectures. So please be sure to do so. And to look very carefully at the syllabus and what the expectations are for different grades. I find that students often forget to look at that. And so I really advise you to take every opportunity to do so. I also expect things to be written grammatically, to be provided to me with grammatically correct language and punctuation. And if you look at the description of what is required with the assignments for the different grades, that can help give you an idea of what my expectations are. And it's really important for you to take a look at. So a couple of guidelines again. Please look at the rubric and make sure that you understand what the different components are that you need to attain a certain grades for different reading assignments and discussion posts, I should say. Okay, so here are a couple of key dates. So by the 14th, I'm going to ask you to pick between 2 nonprofit organizations. There will be information about those nonprofits in your reading materials. So we'll provide you with access to that information. And then I'm going to ask you to pick 3 different funding priorities from each of those nonprofits, so that I know that you have read through their website as well as the information that we have provided. On the 21st, I'm going to expect you to fill out what I would consider to be a mini case for support. That would include the mission, the vision, the values of the organization, as well as their key funding priorities and their kind of logic model of understanding we provide this service, and this service then gives us these outcomes or results. So understanding the logic model. And then the key to a case for support is that it needs to be emotional, urgent, and compelling. The team charter will be due on the 28th, and that is going to help you to understand who are all the players. How is the board used? How is our staff used? How is the CEO or executive director used? And will be very helpful to you as you put teams together for annual campaigns. On May 5th, we're going to talk about donor strategy. May 12th, we'll be looking at measurement and evaluations. Many of you may already know that it's never enough to just say, these are our outcomes. We need to provide data to back that up. So it's very important for us to understand measurement and evaluation and be able to respond to donors with facts as well as anecdotal information. And then we're going to put together all of these different elements that we've talked about during the class. We're going to put together in a calendar so you can see how that works and how many different types, methods of annual giving there actually are. And we're going to put that all together in an annual appeal letter for May 17th. So, so that's a quick rundown of the course and the key dates and assignments. Okay, so let's get right into the material. So again, we're reading in the textbook that I've shown you, the annual campaign by Eric Daubert, chapters 1 and 2. And you also have a reading on reports of the demise of the annual fund are greatly exaggerated. I think you'll enjoy that. We have some additional readings for you. And the discussion question is based on the feedback provided on corporate donors, which we'll be discussing. How can nonprofits improve their relationships? Okay. All right. So let's look at the most recent USA Giving report. In 2022, the contributions were almost $500 billion. The USA Giving report is so helpful in giving us a quick snapshot of um, who's giving and what are they giving to. So they do a great job at letting us know that the largest piece of the giving pie is from individuals. 64% of individuals contributed 319 million to the 499.3 billion. Excuse me, I should say billion. Corporations are only 6%. People often look to corporations and think they're giving a much larger piece of the pie, but it's important to remember that it's 6% of the pie. Bequests, which are donations that people include in their will, are about 9%. So bequests are considered to be a different category, but they are actually from individuals. And then foundations, there's both public and private foundations. There's also government grants, state and federal and regional grants that are available. But foundations, those are not considered to be philanthropic resources, government resources, but foundations are a big piece of the pie. And a reason for that is that private foundations often represent very high net worth individuals as well as their families. So they can make up a large part and also are representative of individuals. So the main point is that it's important to look at all these different, all these different pools of potential donors. But the big message is that individuals comprise the largest segment of donors. And so, if you are a small nonprofit, you want to spend a considerable amount of time looking at how do we attract individuals. What's really helpful to know is what sectors received how much of that 499 or $500 billion. And this gives you this next pie chart gives you both the amount of money that was contributed and the percentage of those dollars that were contributed. So it's very helpful to understand, where is if you can take your nonprofit or take one of the two that I've given you and kind of look at this chart to understand how much of the pie are we competing for, and then imagine how many other nonprofits there are that are competing for that. And that tells you about the caliber of annual giving that we need to provide, because we're competing against, very competitive organizations that may have more resources than we do. So the level of professionalism needs to be high so that we can compete on a level playing field with our colleagues in the nonprofit sector. This is another way of looking at what are the subsectors, the larger subsectors, and what was the percentage. So Here, we've given you that information in a little bit, it's a little easier to read, okay? All right, so that you can see that the uh, social services and higher education are really big components of where people like to give. The culture and the arts are getting only 7% of giving, whereas community economic development is getting around 19%. Education has, always been getting a very large amount. Okay, where did the charitable dollars go? You can look right down this chart and see that information for yourself. And again, kind of consider the world of the nonprofit sector and where does your nonprofit fall, to understand, really to understand, who else is in the sector asking for those resources. So you can see 64% from individuals, 21% from foundations, 9% by bequest, and 6% from corporations. This is a slide from 2018, which is very dated, but directionally, it still remains active. So I like this as another image to help you kind of imagine where's the money coming from outside of just philanthropy. So here you see that there are, 49% of what funds the nonprofit sector are fees for service. If you think about a hospital, you can think about the services, operations, maternity, cancer treatment. So there's a fee that is earned for the service. And then because it is so expensive, now insurance companies are helping to pay those fees. The next largest payer to the nonprofit sector is the government, and then all these other, after the orange, the individuals, foundations, bequests, and corporations, and then we have 5% that's you're not able to kind of drill down on. That makes up the philanthropic world. So again, as a nonprofit, it's important to balance and to have a diversified revenue sources for the organization, both philanthropic, earned, and government funded grants, so that you are managing risk. So the first question we should ask is, why do people give to nonprofits? Of course, the reason should be about altruism. How can we make the world a better place? How can I help my fellow man? That is where we would hope that everyone is giving from that altruistic place. But there are often many different levers as to why people are giving. And I've provided you with some information about, or some different language about why people give. And usually it's a combination of these different factors. So gratitude would be the altruism that I'm talking about. Spiritual or religious reasons often are there, moral and ethical responsibility. Some people feel an obligation, and their religion requires that they tithe a certain percent. But there are also other reasons, prestige, wanting to hang around with individuals who have higher net worth, wanting to do business with those individuals, and using philanthropy as a way to have greater access to those individuals. So there are positive and other reasons, but most of us are very complicated, and so it's usually a number of these different factors go into why do we give. Hopefully, it's more about the altruistic reasons. But the number one lesson that everyone should know is the number one reason that people give is because they were asked. People don't wake up in the morning and decide, how can I give my money away today? Most people need to be asked in order to make a gift. So the idea that it will just occur to people is not really reality, and the reason why there is an entire field in development and advancement, or philanthropy, in whichever way you want to refer to it. To me, there is great joy in giving. And when I talk about that, I mean that there is joy for both the donor as well as the beneficiary of the nonprofit's work, as well as the nonprofit. And when all of us are aligned under a common mission, with common values, um, then that's when there really is joy, for each one of those players in the creation of philanthropy. So there's many articles which talk about, there are psychological benefits to giving, as well as social benefits of giving that we've talked about. You are also, those who give actually feel better and live longer, physically. So there are many different reasons to give. And in my experience, you can often see the joy that people get from giving and how it actually extends the purpose and meaning of their lives. And so I like to think about fundraising as being a facilitator of joy, and not some of the more negative perceptions of fundraisers. But I believe that we are all very mission centric. And the very best fundraisers are motivated by the mission of their nonprofits. And that is really palpable to donors, to potential donors, who really want to engage with individuals that are also excited about the mission and not just walking through the motions. So, okay, let's get into annual giving best practice. So traditionally, annual giving supports the operational costs of a nonprofit, meaning that it's not usually, although it happens enough, but the desire is for the annual fund to be unrestricted so that the board of directors can direct the money where it is needed most, or the CFO of a larger organization can direct the money where it is needed most. And the real purpose of annual giving is as a place to kind of welcome new donors, to engage them in the work of the organization. And then once we have created that engagement, and a gift has been made, to continue to develop that relationship so that the donors who have the ability to are able to give higher and higher levels of donation. So the most expensive thing that you can do in annual giving is to lose a donor. It's much more expensive to acquire a donor than to maintain a relationship. And when we look at maintaining a relationship, it's really no different than your personal relationships. It involves continued communication, accountability, like reporting back on how the money has been used and how it has made a difference, inviting donors to different types of events, not always fundraising events, but often an engagement event that educates them, an event where they might hear testimony from the individuals that we are serving, um, from some of the experts in the field about how we are addressing this social issue or need in the community, and and trying to solve a problem, and that we are indeed effective at that. So when we're able to kind of keep the communication going, to recognize generosity appropriately, and to continue to educate donors, that results in them giving at higher levels when they have the capacity. So we're going to talk about all the different ways that we can do that. So one of the first ways that individuals are engaged is either through direct mail or social media. One of the organizations that is most effective at direct mail is St. Jude's Hospital. And you can see the appeal of this child who has cancer. We can tell because his head is shaved, and he's looking like he's had successful treatment. So all of those things are immediately engaging us, and giving us a reason to care about this young, this child here. So what we'd like to see in direct mail is to offer a compelling story about the organization's mission and impact. So we have an individual here, and we might want to hear about their story. What type of cancer do they have? How did they find it? What are the treatments that St. Jude is offering this individual? St. Jude is known for not charging patients for care. Those are all really compelling. And this individual looks like they're feeling better. So maybe they're in remission after the wonderful treatment that they received at St. Jude's. So in addition to facts and stats, individuals, we need to draw them in with a compelling emotional story that they can relate to. And we need to provide information about how St. Jude's made a difference in this person's life. So with every direct mail piece, the first thing that you're going to want to do is express gratitude. If they have given to the organization before, it's so important to reference that gift and to thank them for the difference they have made before trying to engage them in another ask. And it's important to know who these individuals are. So when you address, for example, if you're a nonprofit and you know who I am and you address me as Professor Canning rather than Mary Beth, I might feel like, I thought we had a closer relationship than that. So understanding, who is the individual and how do we address them as an organization is something that we need to be careful about. If we're just meeting me, it would be appropriate to say Mrs. Canning or Ms. Canning, whatever it might be. And then as the relationship matures, that may change. But if the organization doesn't keep a record of that, that is the biggest turnoff to a donor to make a mistake in the salutation. And then if there's a way for you to capture what was the last donation and what was the result of their donation, how is the organization progressing in response to the appeal that was sent previously, that's, that also would promote feelings of, that it was a rewarding experience for an individual to make a gift. And so they may be interested in making another gift. The most important thing about direct mail is that you don't leave it there, because lots of direct mail can end up in a pile or in the trash, for example. And so it's important that you have some follow-up to that. So individuals You know, fundraisers will often make a follow-up call after the direct mail has landed as soon as possible so that it hasn't landed in the trash. So you want to give them enough time to respond, but not too much time so that it ends up in the trash. And it's a good opener when you're making a phone call to say, we recently sent you, um, a direct mail appeal. And and I wanted to follow up on that and ask if I could provide any information or if you have any questions of me. That's a nice opener for a first phone call. So the way a lot of individuals are interacting with nonprofits these days is, of course, through digital means. So there's 31 billion was raised digitally this year, and 54% of individuals prefer giving online, and 55% of individuals are motivated to give by social media. So any annual campaign, in addition to a direct mail appeal, needs to also be drafting key messages and creating interaction between individuals that are using different types of social media. There has been a big rise in the effectiveness of crowdfunding, digital donation buttons, corporate partnerships, and CSR. And what those organizations are looking for, corporate partnerships are looking for kind of the halo that they receive from their interaction with a particular nonprofit. And as also email marketing continues to be very effective. So when you start to layer, a direct mail appeal, some social media, followed up by a phone call, that's when you start to see results. So the coordination between those different different types of annual giving is really important, because there's so much noise out there that it's important that individuals hear the message, and the repetition is very helpful in the coordination of your messages, your key messages, to different audiences that you have. So when we look at digital trends, I thought I would put together a list of trends that are currently, that we're currently seeing, so that you could kind of look into that a little bit more deeply. So I'm providing these for you to take a deep dive on one that, or two of these, that is of the most interest to you. So you could probably teach this part of the class better than I could. So when we think about social media, we think about our website as an opportunity. We think about X or Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And what I've done for you on these slides is talk to you about, what is this? I've just basically summarized. And again, I think most of you already know these things. Here's the audience that these different platforms are good at attracting. Here's the style with which messages are written. And here's a little bit more about the content that you might consider when using these. So when you think about your nonprofit and who are the type of people what is the audience for that particular nonprofit, it's important to kind of understand and target your social media, because that could use up your entire budget. And so being careful about that. It's great if you can afford to manage and do it all. If you can't, make sure that you're targeting the right audience and have the right platform. Here are some others: TikTok, YouTube, Pinterest, and LinkedIn. And again, the style and what kind of content really works. Who's the demographic that this particular social media appeals to, and understanding, what type of nonprofit, what's the audience that they attract? If you're a museum or an opera, you might attract, one of these, but you might not attract others. So again, kind of focusing and targeting messages, as well as making sure you're on the right social media to attract the audience that is more likely um, to be attracted to giving to your nonprofit is really important in terms of strategy. So special events are another great entry point into nonprofits. Nonprofits, there's a couple of different types of events that you could have. There are fundraising events. So we've all been to a golf tournament or a gala. Um, um, there's so many different types of events. A softball tournament, um, a kids' day, all different types of events, a run, a walk, right? Um, but so those are fundraising events. What is equally, if not even more, successful are engagement events, events where we invite individuals to learn about the nonprofit. Something that's really very compelling at an event is to have an individual that has benefited from the nonprofit provide testimony, talk about here's what my life looked like before, after the intervention of this nonprofit, here's what's happening in my life today. Those personal testimonies are very, very effective. Or having an expert in a particular field that impacts your nonprofit, talk about the benefits of the nonprofit and why it is so essential to your community, society, a particular population, that these services are available to the community. So, thinking about events strategically is really important, whether you are doing an engagement event to kind of cultivate new relationships with donors, or you are trying to actually raise money. It's always important to connect people to the mission of your organization. So I've given you a couple of best practice standards. So again, be really clear about what your goals are. Understand if this is a cultivation event, a fundraising event, or what's called a stewardship event. If this is an event to thank your donors, and what would be the most rewarding experience for them in any one of those categories. Choose an appropriate event. It's not appropriate. Some things are not appropriate for the nonprofit sector. So, you need to be very cognizant of that you're choosing an event that goes along with the organization. So, if it is, and walks are often very popular because they're appropriate to lots of different types of nonprofits, walks and runs, dance-a-thons, all those kinds of things are appropriate. You wouldn't want to have you might not want to have a beer testing event for a nonprofit that's working on alcoholism. I mean, obviously that wouldn't be appropriate. So that's a very obvious one, but there are some that are more, subtle. And so thinking through what's the most appropriate event for our organization. If you serve children, what would be a family event that you could invite them to? Logistics are very important. People that do set special events are usually organizational wizards, those that do them well. And they have a very clear idea about what are we doing 3 months before the event? What are we doing even a year before the event? And what are the tasks that we need to complete with for a month to go? What are the tasks that we need to complete on that particular day? what does the walkthrough look like, so that we make sure that we have the particular donors, entrance to the event covered. When they're eating, we have that managed properly. So kind of walking through an event is something that those individuals who do event planning often do, because it helps you to kind of see from a 360-degree viewpoint, what are the things that could possibly go wrong and what do we need to think about here. Marketing and communication, of course, is incredibly important. And again, doing that strategically is important. And the most important thing about any event is to have a post-event strategy. I can't tell you how many people invest in the event, but don't have any follow-up. Having your board members ready to make a call to individuals that attended the event with the potential to give larger amounts. You could just thank them for coming to the event and ask if they enjoyed the event. You could say, we presented about a particular thing that's needed by this nonprofit. Is that something you'd be interested in funding? So having that follow-up plan, having the acknowledgement already ready to go before the event even happens, is important. Sending out a social media thank you to your guests after the event. The sooner that you're thanking donors, and the number of times that you thank them in different ways, usually creates an environment in which those particular donors are thinking, they really appreciated my generosity. So, I will give the next time they ask me to give. So again, events are great. I think they're so good at creating engagement between, individual donors and organizations, corporations, and the nonprofit, and give us all sorts of reasons to have a follow-up conversation, because that's really what you're always looking to do with annual fund. Annual fund strategy. You're looking to increase the closeness between you and the individual and their understanding of the value that you're providing to society. So in any situation, including grants, which I'm going to be talking about next, but in any type of annual giving, major giving, capital campaign giving, we should be asking these questions. Why us? We should be ready to answer this question to any donor or funder. Why us? Why are we uniquely qualified and positioned the best to address this particular need or issue within our society? And why now? Why do we need this money right now? What happens if we don't get the funding for a particular purpose or a particular organization? What's the, what happens if this doesn't happen? And even more importantly, who will benefit, and how will they benefit? And what are the outcomes that we're going to be looking at in order to tell our donors after the fact that, yes, your donation made a difference, and here are outcomes. Here's how they improved. So those are the types of questions that we should be thinking about. Why me? Why now? And what is this about? Why is it so urgent and compelling that I give now to this specific organization? There's many organizations that are competing for my attention and the dollars that I have to give philanthropically. So we need to be able to answer these questions, and we'll be talking about that in depth later when we're talking about the case for support. Alrighty, here are all the different fundraising methods. So we're talking about annual giving. We've talked about direct mail, digital, special events, and we are going to be talking about grant writing. And then there's a different, there's different ways to give. So there's leadership annual giving. There are major gifts, and every organization defines that differently. For some organizations, that may be $10,000. For other organizations, that may be $2,500 or $1,000. And then there are also capital and comprehensive campaigns and planned giving, which we're not going to be addressing, but it's important for you to know that when you're building a fundraising plan, you want to use as many of these different methodologies as you possibly can. The goal in all of these different methods is to build a level of trust between yourself and the potential donor or the current donor. So that means that we have to follow up and keep that communication going. Otherwise, what we're doing is kind of hit and run asking, which, in the long run, is not sustainable. So developing these relationships is a critical part to any successful annual fund. And it really creates the foundation for all the other types of fundraising that can happen. So if the annual fund isn't done well, it's really difficult to move to other layers of fundraising, other levels of sophistication that may garner larger amounts. Okay, so talking about grants. So there are, as we talked about, corporate, government, and private and public foundations. We're going to talk about grant resources. We're going to talk about some special circumstances and how we engage donors. There's also different types of grants. There are startup or seed grants, which can also be called a pilot grant. So that's a grant in which you are funded for maybe a 3-month period or maybe a year to kind of prove that this particular strategy that you have actually works. There's general operating grants, which are people are becoming more educated about the need for operating grants. So in the past, people just wanted to fund either, physical space or buildings for the nonprofit and the people that they are serving, or they wanted to fund specific programs. What has happened with COVID and the financial kind of roller coaster that we have been on is that people are beginning to understand that nonprofits need also money just to operate, to keep the doors open, to keep the lights on, and they're not as critical about, or they're more open, not completely, but more open to funding staff and funding that, those kind of basic essential needs that any organization has. However, it is much more compelling to fundraise for a particular program of the organization, especially to individuals. Most individuals are going to be excited about a particular program and the approach and what the outcome of that particular program is within the larger nonprofit. And we see larger dollars often accompany gifts that are restricted. So there's unrestricted and restricted. So restricted gifts usually are going to specific programs and services. There's capital grants, which we talked about, which fund new buildings. For example, I was working with the Boys and Girls Club, and they needed a whole new facility. So people are happy to fund those. And then some people say, well, I'm really about the program. I want to get as close to the individuals that you serve as possible. So I want to fund the programs. You get the building built, and I'll fund programs. And then there are conditional grants, grants in which we are expected to, provide, meet certain thresholds, provide services to a particular population, and many foundations have that as criteria in order to apply to those organizations. So, for example, some people may want you to have a budget of $1 million. Some people don't want to fund anybody that has, a budget that's larger than 100 million. They want to focus on more grassroots organizations. So those are some of the conditions that different funders can put on their grants, to actually kind of whittle down the pool of potential nonprofits that they fund. And then within their grants, they have their own mission and their own goals. And so in the grants, they're going to define very clearly, these are the outcomes that we're looking for. This is what we want to support, and this is what we believe has the greatest impact on the population that we want to serve, or the condition or issue regarding the environment, for example, or the criminal justice system. Whatever the issue or group of individuals or individuals, foundations have the ability to specify who it is and how they want a particular population served. So lots of people think that grants are, an easy way to get lots and lots of money. And what I will tell you is that grants is really a numbers game. It is really about how many proposals can you put out there, and that determines how much revenue you can receive from grants. We looked at, it's 21% of the larger pie. So make sure that you're spending an appropriate amount of time on grants, because you could spend your whole budget on writing grants. Make sure that you do your due diligence and understand who is the funder and what are their priorities and what kind of projects have they funded. And that usually requires that you either have professional research done, you use the foundation directory, and understand, these are the primary areas that this foundation is funding. And then I think it's really important to go to the 990 of any foundation to understand, here's who they funded and here's what the project was. Here's what the project was, because that gives you even more detail into what the guidelines are. They'll provide you with the guidelines. And I often, when working with clients, am like, we don't get to define what their guidelines are. We need to follow them to the letter, or we disqualify ourselves. So it's not, when we look at what the guidelines are and what they, what their purpose is and what the solution is that they're looking for, if we aren't able to provide an answer, that list, then we shouldn't provide and waste both our time or their time, because they both involve limited resources. So if we are able to respond to, the exact guidelines that they provide, and we are a solution, it's really important that we do all of that work before taking the time to put together a grant. And in our letter of inquiry, for example, when we're communicating with the potential funder, we may be talking to a grant officer, or if it's a smaller nonprofit, if it's a smaller foundation, we may actually be talking to the individual whose private foundation it is. But understanding what their priorities are and what their guidelines are, and being able to respond to questions in writing or in a meeting is critical. So never go into a grant meeting without having, clear understanding and preparing responses to, because there's not a lot of mercy in the foundation world for individuals that haven't done their homework, their due diligence, because it's available. And before investing the time and resources from your nonprofit, or wasting the time of this foundation, make sure that you guys are in alignment. So here are the grant components. These are the typical grant components. So there's a cover letter, which explains who you are, why you're uniquely qualified to address this issue, any accolades that you have, anything that qualifies you as a viable grant recipient is what you want to put in that. And then a high level explanation of the services you provide and what you do. Then you're going to provide an executive summary of the proposal and the outcomes that you're looking for. We talked about the credentials, and you're going to talk about the need. This is the need. Here's how we back it up. Here's the statistics. And this is said by a credible source. So this kind of creates, the rationale for why we're coming to you, now. And we want to make sure to explain that we know exactly who you are, and we are going to respond to your priorities. So we want to talk about what's the method in which we are going to address the need or the issue. What are our goals? What are our objectives? We want to describe that activity. And then we want to provide a timeline of, we're going to start here. And then by, in 3 months, we're going to have these results. And in another 3 months, we'll have these results, right? And at the end of this project, we're going to provide you with an evaluation about our outcomes. And we're going to be talking about measurement and evaluation later on in our course curriculum. They're going to want to know what your budget is. They often want to know who your board members are. And this is what goes into the appendices, your board members. Other funders, they often want to know. Nobody wants to be the first one in the pool. They usually want to understand, like, okay, this is a solid organization and they have funders that are already lined up and that they're partnering with and will be an addition to that, unless it's a pilot grant. And even then, they want to know, well, who are the sources that you're going to be going to, so that they know that you are viable and likely to succeed. And then what is the conclusion? What's the, kind of rallying cry that unites the potential funder to the nonprofit organization, in a very compelling way, so that hopefully when the grant committee gets together to vote on who are they going to fund, you've presented a very persuasive case. Always remember that it's not enough to make statements. It has to be backed up with statements and facts. And, being a successful grant writer is about following directions and understanding exactly what it is that funder wants. So next, we're going to talk about corporate giving. And there are many different motivations for corporate entities to give. And similar to individuals, it can often be a number of these different reasons. So one thing that we know about corporate giving is that organizations who engage with nonprofits have retained their staff better than organizations that don't include volunteerism in the work that they are doing. So So as a team member, one of the ways that you build a team is often by having them have a day of caring, for example, like the United Way does, or go and build a house for Habitat for Humanity. So that is a service to society, but it also creates a team and a corporate culture that is beneficial to the organization. It unites the organization's team members around something that is larger than themselves. So, we're Microsoft and we are making computers, and that's a good thing that serve, society. But we are also really invested in Habitat for Humanity, and that does a number of things for us, which I, put here. So some organizations actually put the logo of the organizations that the nonprofits that they're supporting on their product. Research shows that people are more inclined to support for-profit organizations that are supporting nonprofits than they are to, buying another product. So if they have a choice between a product that has a nonprofit affiliated with it, most individuals are going to prove, in their comparable prices and quality, they're going to go for the business or corporation that is supporting the nonprofit sector. There's all sorts of studies that retention, happiness, satisfaction of employees is increased by engaging with the nonprofit sector. There's the public image, the halo that a corporation can get for providing significant support to a nonprofit. And they can be involved in projects that, lower the cost for the company, because retention, and just like the retention of donors, is a very expensive, losing a donor is very expensive. Losing an employee is very expensive. All the training that you've put into that employee works, and productivity is higher if individuals feel like they're part of a team. That is doing good work in a particular community or location. So there's tons of benefits to corporate giving that should be leveraged by corporations, but also by the nonprofit sector, because we're providing a value to them, not only to society, but also to their productivity and the happiness of their employees. So hopefully most organizations have what's called a corporate social responsibility statement. And it talks about, we are, often they talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how they are supportive of those things. They may talk about the fact that they are supportive of environmental causes. It kind of defines, they may be also very invested in the communities where their employees live. And so when we look at what is the corporate social responsibility of different corporations, they're often going to have values and that kind of describe, and then they're going to have a corporate social responsibility strategy that describes, where it is that they want to invest. There's a lot of power and influence that goes along with philanthropy. There's, the individuals that are that are giving, and the corporations that are giving, and those relationships, access issues to those types of individuals and organizations can be very important for the businesses and corporations that are, that want exposure to those particular individuals. They also want to create a stakeholder image, an image that their organization, portrays to their customers and clients. And so giving provides, there are all these different reasons. Some organizations, maybe one or two of these. Most are gonna, most are going to be, having a little bit of each of these. So it's important to think about how do we leverage those levers when we are interacting with corporations to the benefit of the individuals or issues that we are trying to resolve in society. So many of the things that I just spoke about are talked about in a little bit more detail here. So 73% of the public believe that corporations should be investing in their communities and society as a whole. Um, again, social impact, understanding, what is it that how is the organization helping to move society forward is important. And the purpose of that particular corporation is important to both customers and employees. And with social media, employees are becoming louder and louder. Um, and um, and so organizations are very attuned to addressing this. And then engagement. You'll see employee satisfaction surveys that often talk about, employee engagement is really low. How can we increase that? And then you can see here, when employees aren't happy, they have no qualms about going to social media and expressing their disappointment in their particular organizations. That's one of the things that boards are most concerned about. And so it's really important for these organizations to ensure that their employees are engaged in the purpose of the corporation, but also in a societal, um, a societal benefit. If you're working for an organization that is exploiting workers in a foreign country, you can rest assured that your employees will make comments about that affect that affect the bottom line negatively. Many corporate social responsibility plans are based on the Sustainable Development Goals. So that is something to take a look at. Go to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Take a look at what they consider to be the how we make a better world, and see how you can align that with what it is that you're doing in the world, because those are often guideposts for corporations when they're thinking about their corporate social responsibility plan. So when we think about a corporation, what is it that makes a nonprofit attractive to them? And as we talked about, the strategic alignment and the strength of the mission of the organization in relation to the corporation is important. Measurement and evaluation of impact or outcomes is very important, because those corporate boards are reporting to a board of directors that want to be able to articulate, what was the impact we had? We invested this much money and this much of our employees' time, which has a cost to it. And what was the outcome? Can we actually say that our investment, our charitable donation, made a difference? It's really important to corporate organizations that we think through what's the expertise that this particular organization has that they can offer to us. What's the product that they can have that would benefit our particular population that we're serving? How can we leverage what it is they do to create visibility for the corporation, but also serve the mission of our organization? And how can we best engage their employees? Because we talked about all the benefits of that. So when you're talking to corporate funders, understanding these 4 different components is really important to kind of aligning yourself properly for a corporate funder. So here are the results of a survey that I did along with another consulting firm, Purposeful Projects, in collaborative research. And we looked at an equal number of corporations and nonprofits to get some insight into, what is it that corporate funders are looking for from the nonprofit sector, and how do nonprofits view corporations, and the information that they're providing. And so you have an idea of, here are the, oops, excuse me. So I'm just going to move myself so I can see this better. Okay, so by looking at these charts, and the keys that are underneath them, there's a lot that you can ascertain about corporate giving. And by the pies, you can tell, what was the sorry about that. What was the nonprofit focus? Whoops. Let's get back to where we were. I've covered a lot of ground. Doing very well here. This is a lot to digest. Okay, here we are. And let's put that back on slideshow. Great. Thanks for your patience here. Okay, now we're just going to click through this very quickly. Okay. Okay, here we are. Yay. So by looking at the pie chart, you can ascertain, where are most corporations, what are the issues that nonprofits are focusing on. The majority of nonprofits are focusing on human services of the individuals that we interviewed for, provided a survey to and responded to. So you know who it is that we've spoken to, what kind of nonprofits, and then what kind of revenue. What kind of revenue were our nonprofits that took this survey? So we have, the majority of them are 20, let's see, around 55, about $5 million to $10 million. And also, or under $1 million, which corresponds. The majority of nonprofits are under $1 million. And then you can see the other, 10 million, but under 25 million. So, and then over 50 million. And then what were our corporate funders interested in? The majority of them are interested in human services. So that's a nice fit. And public societal benefit, which goes along with human services. Those are the two areas that are the largest. I think we can go to education next, and then health. And then the smaller components are arts and culture, and let's see, environment. Okay. So take a good look at this. Take some time to study it. So here's what we heard from corporate funders. They are not excited about our inability not to measure impact. So, they have boards that are demanding better data than the data that we're providing. So a key area to look at, for all nonprofits, really, not just those that are, going after corporate funders, is to understand, how are we using metrics? How are we benchmarking our performance? How are we collecting data, and then communicating it to our potential constituency for giving? How are we doing that? And if we're not doing that well, we're not providing a really compelling, robust case for funding. to either corporate funders or to the general public. So measurement and evaluation is such an important part of defining who we are and justifying the need for more resources. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our session. That's a lot to absorb, and we look forward to talking with you further, and we will see you next week. Thanks so much. Okay. That are more updated.